Catholic Connection is a co-production of Ave Maria Radio and EWTN Radio and carried across the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network.
Welcome to Catholic Connection with Teresa Tomeo, keeping you connected to your faith and your world. Teresa tackles the issues of faith and culture, the pro-life message, and media awareness. And now, here's Teresa Tomeo.
On a Wednesday, January 29th, thanks for tuning in to the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network. Busy day today, much to discuss, and we have a great lineup for you as always. Very excited, and I think it'll be a very blessed time. Paul Vaughn is going to be joining us. He is a pardoned pro-life advocate who was prosecuted by the Biden Department of Justice for his taking part in a peaceful, life-affirming gathering. Now, he was represented by the Thomas More Society and also featured in recent articles in both the National Catholic Register and Catholic News Agency, ncregister.com and catholicnewsagency.com. And it was so beautiful on Friday covering the March for Life and talking to so many friends of mine in the pro-life movement, including my fellow Michigander who was with me on the riser before the rally, near the rally stage, talking about this and seeing the President of the United States in a video announce the pardons, which were actually given on Thursday. And the response of the crowd was just overwhelming joy and gratitude, and this is very good news. But what needs to be done from here on out? Now, we also learned that there are some restrictions as the American, ADF, I can't think of their full name, it's escaping me now, but they were on with us, Alliance Defending Freedom. They were on with us yesterday and talking about the fact that the Trump administration has very much restricted the use of the FACE Act to go after conservatives, which is basically what they did under the Biden administration. That's not opinion, that's fact, and it's documented. So they're calling, though, and others are calling for not only restrictions on the FACE Act, but for it to be, wiped out entirely because there's been so much abuse. So we'll talk about many issues with Paul. That's coming up at 15 minutes past the hour. And then, of course, it's a Wednesday. That means we go to Rome to continue our news coverage on all things Catholic and Vatican with our very own Joan Lewis, getting the beautiful audience message today from the Holy Father, and also looking at what else is going on. A lot to talk about. Of course, we just had the celebration, which is wrapping up, of World Communications Day, and it's pretty cool. As I mentioned earlier, there are a lot of, I think I mentioned this on Monday, if I remember correctly. If you go to not only our different sites that we have on the Jubilee year through our various news outlets, but if you check out the Vatican website, the specific website for the Jubilee year, you will find that there are different celebrations. So they have a calendar, and they have different celebrations going on, and they just concluded this celebration dedicated to communications, and so there are all kinds of events with the Pope meeting certain groups, and they have conferences from different parts of the world. And an article that I'm going to have in the National Catholic Register very soon is about the Jubilee of Deacons. Being, of course, that I'm a deacon's wife, they are doing a special deacon gathering for deacons and their families in Rome in February. So if, again, you look at that calendar and you say, gosh, I want to go to the Jubilee this year, what could I participate in that's of interest? So it may be in line with your ministry, what you're doing in the church right now. So in addition to going, which is a great thing if you can get there and go through the holy doors, make sure you do some research and find out what's available. Beautiful different events. And throughout Rome, in addition to the various holy doors at the major basilicas, there's opportunities to pray in different churches. They've set up different pilgrim stations. Now, the other thing, too, that's really important is to make sure you're checking out what your own diocese is doing, because there's some wonderful, wonderful opportunities in your own diocese to have your own mini pilgrimage. Even if you're going to the Jubilee year, maybe do that before or when you return from Rome for the Jubilee activities in the Eternal City. So just a little bit of a suggestion. Oh, I forgot to mention at the bottom of the hour, I am going to do, again, my new segment on the program, which is Italy, Shrines and Wonders Wednesday, based on my new book, which is coming out from EWTN. I'm so excited. Italy, Shrines and Wonders. It's the book of the month, actually, from EWTN. You can check it out on EWTN RC. We're going to talk about a very unique piece of art that very few people recognize or pay attention to in Assisi, but it's one of my favorites. I'll explain at about 9:30 Eastern Time. And then, as I mentioned, Joan Lewis. Alrighty then, let's take a look at the weather, shall we? Because there's some issues going on across the country Well, no surprise there because it's winter. We do know that we are going to see some heavy weather in parts of the Northeast. So let's take a look. A clipper storm and Arctic front triggering additional snow showers and squalls over the eastern Great Lakes, upstate New York, interior New England, and the northern mid-Atlantic states into this evening, making for hazardous travel. There's a storm crossing the southern Rockies, and that includes heavy snow moving over to the south central part of the country. Tomorrow we'll see areas of severe thunderstorms and excessive rain in the same area, so a mixed bag in terms of the weather. It's almost 6 minutes past the hour. I do hope you're having a beautiful day here at EWTN Radio. Thanks so much for tuning in. Let's get started with the news on a Wednesday. Republican members of Congress, as reported in Catholic News Agency, introducing a bill to protect parental rights, directing the upbringing, education, and health care of their children. Introduced by U.S. Senators Tim Scott from South Carolina, James Lankford from Oklahoma, and Representative Virginia Fox from North Carolina, all Republicans, the Families' Rights and Responsibilities Act, seeking to prevent government intervention in parental decisions. In a press release, the senators saying the parents have a fundamental right to control the upbringing of their child, whether it's in the classroom or in the home, adding that far too often, according to a press release, parents are being pushed out of their child's lives and children are paying the price. They say they'll always fight to put parents back in the driver's seat and ensure they remain the lead decision makers in their child's life. If enacted, the bill would affirm, quote, that parents have the fundamental right to direct the upbringing, education, and health care of their children, end quote, and block the federal government from interfering substantially with this right and allow parents also, it says, to seek legal action for violations of the bill in legal or administrative proceedings at both the state and the federal levels. The White House says President Trump is also sending a loud and clear message on immigration. Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt highlighting the executive actions taken by the president in his first week in office during the first White House press briefing of his second term. That happened yesterday.
Since taking the oath of office, President Trump has taken more than 300 executive actions, secured nearly $1 trillion in U.S. investments, deported illegal alien rapists, gang members, and suspected terrorists from our homeland.
She also read a list of some of the illegal immigrants who have been detained during raids this week. Immigration and Customs Enforcement has said the Trump administration's crackdown on illegal immigrants has resulted so far in over 3,500 arrests. Meanwhile, President Trump is signing the Laken-Riley Act today, requiring that illegal immigrants accused of theft and violent crimes be locked up. Senator John Cornyn says the bill garnered wide bipartisan support.
The situation is so dire that now Democrats, after the November 5th election, are actually finally seeing the light.
The Texas Republicans successfully added an amendment to the bill, including assault of a police officer to the list of crimes that trigger mandatory detention. The bill signing is a first of the new president. It's named for a 22-year-old nursing student who was killed on the University of Georgia campus by an illegal immigrant. Scott Pringle tells us Immigration and Customs Enforcement agents were in New York yesterday conducting raids as part of the nationwide crackdown on illegal immigrants.
Before sunrise, the feds arrested a person with a criminal history and an outstanding warrant. This was after an ICE raid at an apartment in the Hybrid section of the Bronx. More arrests could be coming. Secretary of Homeland Security Kristi Noem was in the Bronx and saw this arrest firsthand. Republican Staten Island Congresswoman Nicole Maliotakis thanked the Trump administration, saying they're removing dangerous criminals from the streets. Meanwhile, the Legal Aid Society says in response, it's launched a new Know Your Rights hub featuring resources to help people navigate immigration issues.
President Trump also ordered a freeze on domestic and foreign federal aid. Alice Barr said that this came from a White House internal memo.
Quote, including but not limited to financial assistance for foreign aid, non-governmental organizations, DEI, woke gender ideology, and the Green New Deal, calling it a temporary pause to determine the best use of funding.
However, late yesterday, a federal judge granting an administrative stay, pausing the plans at least through next week. The freeze was set to take effect yesterday at 5 p.m. Eastern and was ordered on domestic and foreign, as you heard, federal aid, with Social Security and Medicare not affected. Trump cabinet nominee Robert F. Kennedy Jr. grilled by a Senate committee. That'll happen today. He has been picked to head the Department of Health and Human Services. He will appear today before the Senate Committee on Finance, where he will be asked about his plans for Medicare and Medicaid. The former presidential candidate must be confirmed by the full Senate before leading the health department. Brian Shook tells us the Trump administration is planning to offer buyouts to federal workers who don't want to return to the office.
This deferred resignation would include a severance package of roughly 8 months' pay and benefits. The administration says it expects 5 to 10% of the federal workforce to quit. A senior administration official says that could lead to roughly $1 billion in savings. The buyout offer is set to go out through a new system that allows officials the ability to email all federal employees at once. The resignation period opened Tuesday and runs through February 6th.
The LA Department of Water and Power investigating whether an empty reservoir led to the failure of its water system during the deadly Palisades fire. This man, who lost his home in the fire, addressed the Board of Water and Power Commissioners yesterday.
What is the explanation for this? There's been no explanation offered to the people of Palisades whose houses burned out.
The same resident blaming the water department for the lack of water for the firefighters.
That reservoir was drained by the department about a year ago.
Several fire hydrants ran dry during the peak of the firefight on January 7th and 8th. The 117 million gallon reservoir near the Palisades Highlands neighborhood drained early last year after a tear was found in its protective cover, but it has not been repaired or refilled. The water department is planning to hire an independent engineer, they say, to assess just how much the reservoir being empty contributed to the loss of water and water pressure. New steel wedges are being installed in New Orleans' Bourbon Street just weeks after a man drove a truck into a crowd in the tourist district, killing 14 people. As the city gears up for the big Super Bowl and Mardi Gras, Police Superintendent Ann Kilpatrick says she wants to emphasize that New Orleans is safe.
We know and are confident that our plans are good.
In addition to the wedges, which are designed to prevent a similar terrorist attack, there will be bomb-sniffing dogs, air security, and tactical assistance. Kilpatrick says police will be meeting today with business owners to talk about additional ways to make the French Quarter safe. Lawmakers are talking about the Panama Canal's impact on U.S. trade and national security on Capitol Hill this week. Texas Senator Ted Cruz saying the canal is vital to America's economic interests and added the canal's treaty, while the Panama is treating America unfairly.
The Panama Canal was not just given away. President Carter struck a bargain. He made a treaty. And President Trump is making a serious and substantive argument that that treaty is being violated right now.
The meeting comes after the president suggested the U.S. could take control of the Panama Canal. Illinois Republicans are suing over the state's legislative map.
All voters should have a voice, and whether you're a Republican, a Democrat, or an independent, and we have to fight the fights we can win right now, and this is one that we feel we can win.
That's House Republican leader Tony McCombie, who says House GOP members filed a lawsuit asking the state Supreme Court to declare the Democratic mapping effort an unconstitutional political gerrymandering. The suit claiming the boundaries were drawn to give Democrats supermajorities in the state House and Senate. Rory O'Neill tells us your confidence in the economy, well, it likely depends on your political party affiliation.
In a survey conducted during the presidential transition, Gallup measured a change in economic attitudes based largely on party politics. Gallup measured a 30-point drop in economic confidence among Democrats, and about the same percentage of Republicans grew more optimistic. The confidence score is up 16 points among independents. A similar partisan swing was measured during the last presidential transition 4 years ago.
That doomsday clock 1 second closer to midnight. The Bulletin of Atomic Scientists announcing they were setting the clock to 89 seconds to midnight now. This is the shortest time to 0 hour in its history, spanning 75 years. A professor who chairs the Bulletin Science and Security Board says the clock is meant to start a global conversation about the very real threats that keep the world's top scientists awake, and that includes nuclear threats. He also called on leaders across the globe to take action on the life and death issues. And finally, in our news segment on a Wednesday morning of Catholic Connection on EWTN, Bree Tennis tells us flags will now be flown at full staff today as a month-long period of mourning for former President Jimmy Carter has ended.
All government flags flew at half-staff in honor of former President Jimmy Carter, who died December 29th at the age of 100. Since then, all flags at the White House and other public buildings and grounds were hoisted to the top, then lowered to half-staff as a sign of respect. Flags return to full staff today. According to halfstaff.org, other than when a president dies, there are 7 holidays each year where the U.S. flag is flown at half-staff.
Great to be with you on a Wednesday and every day, Monday through Friday, here on the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network. We get an update regarding those pro-lifers who were pardoned. That's coming up next. Stay tuned.
The most amazing saints from modern times, John Paul II, Maximilian Kolbe, and Maria Faustina with the Divine Mercy. This is Steve Ray. We invite you to join us on a pilgrimage to Poland and experience this incredible Catholic country, the land of saints, Catholic culture, gorgeous churches and shrines, and delicious food. Join us next April as we again visit Poland, one of our favorite pilgrimage destinations.
Find the Ave Maria Radio travel tab at avemariaradio.net.
The wisdom of Mother Angelica.
I told him about the woman who came to me and said her 2 children hadn't spoken to each other for 2 years. Their grandma died, and she was very wealthy. She left half to each one. She said they're arguing over a commode. She said it's inlaid. Can you imagine being in hell and somebody saying to you, "What are you here for?"
EWTN. Live truth. Live Catholic.
I turned from a recreational drug user to a drug addict. That took me to my knees. I lost a family, almost 2 families. I lost friends. Now that I'm back in the Catholic Church, I'm a new person. I love it. I love it. My heart's there. I took communion after 18 years, and the rest of the Mass I sat and cried. God restored my life. God restored my family. God restored my love.
If you've been away from the Catholic Church for any reason, visit CatholicsComeHome.org today.
People ask how they can care for older family members who can't fully care for themselves. One answer is Visiting Angels, America's choice in senior home care. Visiting Angels assists adults nationwide with 600 locations to continue living at home and not have to move into a nursing home. Their caregivers provide assistance in hygiene, meals, and light housework. Services are provided up to 24 hours per day, and you can select your caregiver before service begins. More information, including franchise opportunities, is on the web at visitingangels.com.
Almost 18 minutes past the hour. Honored to have Paul Vaughn on with us, a recently pardoned pro-life advocate, prosecuted by the Biden Department of Justice for taking part in peaceful, life-affirming gatherings at abortion mills in various places. He's represented by the good folks at the Thomas More Society. Paul, God bless you. Thanks for your pro-life work over the years. And first of all, where were you when you heard the news, and where was your case at that point in terms of what you were prosecuted for? Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, you bet. The case is currently at the Sixth Circuit of Appeals in Ohio, and we're pushing forward with the appeal on our conviction from last January, a year ago, in the District Court in Middle Tennessee. I was actually, at the time of the announcement, it's pretty funny that people think there's this great big formal process and stuff that goes on, but I was sitting on a panel with Thomas More, who is representing me in the case, and we were discussing the case at the Law and Life conference there in D.C., and all of a sudden my attorney starts getting text, talking about us being pardoned, and his first response is, "No, that's fake news. I haven't heard anything. Nobody's called me. Let me know." He says, "No, I'm watching Trump sign it right now on Fox News. Your guys are being pardoned." So that's a pretty funny way to find out, but we have to share it, of course, with the panel and everybody there in the audience at the same time. So it was a fun turn of events.
So take us back to when you found out about being prosecuted by the Biden DOJ. Where were you? What happened? Just give us the details of your case in particular.
Well, sure. I didn't find out till the Gestapo showed up at 7 a.m. October 5th, 2022, banging on my door with armed weapons and, pointing guns at me, and held my children at bay. 3 of my kids out in the yard with a guy with a long gun and tactical gear. And that was my introduction to, hey, we'd like to talk to you about this nonviolent thing you were at a year and a half ago. So we went through the terrorization of the weaponized DOJ, and that was the introduction to the case.
Your case was one of the most, I think, egregious in terms of the way it was handled. I mean, it was all awful when you can't even express, freedom of speech and whatnot. But what was that like for your family? And I'm sure that must still be, there must be some post-traumatic stress over that whole incident.
Sure, you bet. And we're still dealing with it. 7 of my 11 children were home that day. And from our young, we shut down, she would have been 18 months old at the time. She was literally, we were due with our 11th child at the time of the event. In March of 21 is when the event was. And so from the little toddler that was in bed with her mama, as I was getting up to take the kids to school and go to work, to a 20-year-old that was still at home, getting ready to, in the process of moving out and stuff. But it was traumatic. I mean, it's not something you hear every day, not something you expect to have. I say that it was we're at war, and it's an undeclared war, and they are armed and we're not. And there was, they abused the force of the law and the lethal force authorization that they had to intimidate and to try to scare our family and and ultimately America and the rest of the pro-life community, right, through us as a proxy. They wanted to send a message that we will come after you and we will arrest you, and the law be damned. It doesn't matter. We're going to do what we think is right, and just not to go too far with it, but that was the foundation of the Reproductive Health Task Force. Came about because Roe was overturned because of the Dobbs decision. So after the Dobbs decision, the Reproductive Health Task Force was put in place, and they basically said, "Oh, we're going to follow the rule of law." No, they didn't say that. They said, "What we're going to do is we're going to set aside the rule of the law that we're all supposed to be following, and we like to talk about when it's advantageous to us. But we're going to do what we want to do, and we're going to use this novel approach to law to go after these pro-lifers."
It's just unbelievable. In the United States of America, I guess it is and it isn't. God forbid, what do you think would have happened had your case gone forward under a different set of leadership? What do you think?
Well, I don't think the case would have ever gone forward under anybody other than the Biden-Harris regime. I'm sure there are a lot of godless leaders, I guess, in history that it could have gone under somebody else, but nobody on the political scene was as far bent as they are. And so we didn't do anything. We didn't break face, right? In my particular case, and my co-defendant, Dr. Boyd, neither one of us broke the actual details and structure of the FACE Act. The only reason we got looped into it was by the illegal application of an 1800 civil rights era law conspiracy, and a very novel approach to prosecuting people. But basically, Sanjay Patel is the DOJ lawyer who wrote in the spring edition of the 2022 DOJ Journal, about how, hey, we could use this law, this civil rights law that was used against the KKK, and we could apply against the pro-lifers as a way to go and add. He said there's 3 advantages to use the law this way and use this in conjunction with FACE. One, it makes a misdemeanor a felony, because FACE was only a misdemeanor first offense with 6 months. The second advantage is it takes a 6-month sentence and makes it a 10-year sentence. And the third advantage is you don't have to prove an overt infraction of the underlying law. So you don't have to have anything you don't do anything physically to bring forth the conspiracy. Basically, all you are is in proximity or in communication with people that are ideologically aligned with, that are actually breaking FACE, and now you get looped up into this conspiracy net.
Yeah. Well, it was just a statement from the previous administration in terms of what they thought of pro-lifers and how they were going to crack down, and had nothing to do with anything legal or illegal. And it's what's so ironic, even if, let's say in your case, you did violate the FACE Act, the violating the FACE Act on the part of the pro-lifers, and Dr. Monica and I were talking about this Friday at the March for Life, you're talking about peaceful sit-ins. You're not talking about people who are going in, God forbid, and blowing up buildings or burning buildings or causing any type of physical harm or property damage. You're talking about peaceful actions, which were so prevalent, especially, we know, during the Vietnam conflict and the civil rights movement. And so many other efforts. Even recently, there were some very violent ones, but even last summer with the Palestinian protests and whatnot around the country. What would you like to see next before we let you go? We have about a minute and a half, Paul, in terms of the FACE Act, because the Justice Department under Trump also announced they're going to restrict it greatly, but some are calling for it to be wiped out completely. What do you think?
Yeah, we need to, there's a couple things the pro-life movement needs to push for. We need to absolutely repeal the PACE Act. We need to defund Planned Parenthood. And I would call, if you want justice, there's a huge abridgment of justice for people in America, from January 6ers to Bitcoin developers to pro-lifers. The Justice Department was weaponized and abused, and we need to see restitution for those people who spent years in jail. And sure, they get a pardon, but that didn't undo the damage that's been done, and it doesn't do the faith that the American people have in our government, and we need to work towards restoring that faith.
Paul, thank you for your courage, for your pro-life witness, and God bless you. What's your next step in terms of pro-life activity? One more question real quickly. Go ahead. Have about 30 seconds.
Yeah, we're looking at that. There's some things that need to be done. I think we exposed, in this case, the character of our nation needs help, and so we're looking at some public prayer opportunities and maybe reading the Psalms at the courthouses and things like that across our nation to help address the character issue in our nation.
God love you. We'll cover it for you, too. Don't forget, there's a good story about Paul on the Register this morning, ncregister.com. We'll be right back.
Father Benedict Rochelle.
Brothers and sisters, we got to tell the truth in this country. For heaven's sakes, I wouldn't want to go to a synagogue and find that they were having a Muslim service. I wouldn't want to go to a mosque and run into a Baptist service. I don't want to go to a Baptist church and find out that they're having Mass. We've got to be honest to ourselves. We've got to be what we are. I'd rather a good old-fashioned, honest agnostic than a phony Christian any day of the week. There are reluctant agnostics. There are atheists who are searching for God, and they may find Him. But somebody who says they're doing something in the name of God, in the name of Christ, and God and Christ have nothing to do with it, is violating this commandment. I am the Lord your God. You shall not take my name in vain.
The people you know and trust are on EWTN.
Dr. Ray Guarendi.
When I've had enough. I ask parents, when do you decide to discipline? One of the most common answers is, when I've had enough. If discipline is designed to teach, then we need to discipline before we've had enough. We need to discipline because the behavior's wrong, not because emotionally it's pushed us to our edge. Besides, when you get to when you've had enough, you're much more likely to yell and scream and say things that you have to go to confession for. So, the suggestion is discipline out of principle, not emotion. Principle means because it needs discipline, and I'm going to do it when I'm calm. Emotion means I'm going to be moved to do it just because I'm mad.
Welcome back, Catholic Connection on a Wednesday. And as I mentioned earlier, I think it was last week we announced it, each Wednesday in the beginning of the year, actually probably through, I think, maybe the spring, I'll be doing a special segment every Wednesday called Italy's Shrines and Wonders Wednesday, talking about one of the sacred spaces and fascinating places that I highlight in my brand new book by the same name, Italy's Shrines and Wonders, being published by EWTN Publishing, and it's the book of the month for January. And you can check it out at the religious catalog, EWTNRC.com. So today I'd like to take you back to the Umbria region, which is in central Italy. And there are so many amazing places and sacred spaces also in Umbria. It is known as the Green Heart of Italy, the Costa Verde, but also the land of the saints. And most people would be familiar with Umbria because of the beautiful medieval town of Assisi and, of course, a birthplace of both St. Francis and Santa Chiara, St. Clare, also the burial place of both of those amazing saints, and also the tomb of Carlo Acutis, the new soon-to-be saint who's going to be canonized later this year during the Jubilee Year of Hope. His tomb is located in St. Mary Major, not St. Mary Major in Rome, but St. Mary Major in Assisi. So when you go to Assisi, as I say in my book and when I consult people through Tees Italy, obviously you need to go to so many of the beautiful places. There's San Rufino, which is a large parish church in Assisi, which actually has a heart of Carlo Acutis there. It also houses the baptismal font, where St. Francis was baptized. And then you go down to Santa Chiara, where, of course, you find the beautiful tomb of St. Chiara. And you also find in the church there, dedicated to the life of St. Clare, her tomb is there, obviously. Also, the San Damiano cross, the cross that originally spoke to St. Francis, that told him, was Jesus speaking to him, Francis rebuilt my church. And then you go down a little bit further and you hit St. Mary Major, and then you go down even further and you see the Basilica of St. Francis. It's incredible. It's massive, it's beautiful, it's several layers deep. And in the upper section of the church, you'll find these beautiful frescoes, most of which are attributed to Giotto. And they actually depict the life of St. Francis and various very important events of the amazing saint's life. And the middle level, there is more of St. Francis, and there's a beautiful church there as well, actually several churches and altars. And on the walls there you see Francis, and on one side you see the life of Christ, and then you go down even further to the crypt of St. Francis and his companions. But if you go back up to the very top of the basilica, in front of the basilica, there's this beautiful, well-kept lawn with the tau cross, and it's just lovely. It's great, photo op. But a lot of folks, when they come out of the church, obviously it's pretty understandable that you're so overwhelmed by the experience you just had. You've prayed at the tomb, you've been taught by a guide about the detail on the frescoes, depicting the life of this amazing saint. And you're trying to process everything that you just took in. And trust me, that's why I tell people don't do more than one tour a day, because it's just too much. There's so much beauty, and there's so much you learn about the faith that your mind and your heart just can't handle it. You feel like you're about to explode. It's so overwhelmingly incredible. And that's why I think a lot of folks miss this particular statue, which has become one of my absolute favorite pieces of art in all of Assisi, which might seem surprising given all that these amazing places have to offer. I mean, the artwork in the Basilica of St. Francis alone is off the charts. It's, as I said, incredible. And also, by the way, this statue is so important to me that in the online Learn series that we're doing through EWTN, which will come up in the spring, we're going to offer a free online course all about Italy's Shrines of Wonders. And we actually shot them with our wonderful Rome crew across Italy at many of these places, including in Assisi in several spots, in front of this beautiful statue entitled The Return of St. Francis. This statue is as recent as 2005. So it's only been in front of this basilica. This basilica, dates back to the 14th century, especially the frescoes there. And so think about that. Centuries-old frescoes, a centuries-old church, and in front of it a statue from 2005. But it's not to be missed. So if you're going to Italy for the Jubilee year, or if you're going in the next 2 years, when you're in Assisi, look for this statue, the Return of St. Francis. It's right in front of the upper level of the Basilica of St. Francis. And why is this so important? Well, St. Francis, we know, heard from God in many ways, through Scripture, through dreams, through visions. And on one vision, before he became a monk and started the Order of the Franciscans, he really felt that the Lord was telling him to become a knight in the papal army. So he, doing the right thing, that he's listening to the Lord, he goes and he gets himself another horse. He gets a horse all fitted in the armor. He gets himself all fitted in the armor, and he is just going to go and fight for the Lord in the church. And so he's heading out, and he gets ill, and he has to stop in Spoleto. Spoleto is probably about 45 minutes southeast of Assisi. Beautiful town as well if you want to see something really cool. Anyway, so he's resting there, and he has another vision where the Lord gives him a different direction. And he realizes that he's not going to be a knight in the papal army. So what does he do? He turns around on the horse, and he heads back to Assisi. And the image of this great saint that's in front of the basilica, again, the statue is known as the Return of St. Francis, and you can look it up, shows St. Francis with his head down and the horse doing the same thing. It's so moving if you just stop and look at it and ponder it. And there's a plaque in front of the statue that reads, "Lord, what do you want me to do?" And to me it's important because isn't that what we all have to do? How many of us, myself included, have gone through our lives, even after our reversions or conversions, thinking, I'm going to bloom where I'm planted. I'm doing what the Lord wants me to do, and this is great. I'm going to do this, that, and the other thing. Not that those are bad things, but maybe the Lord has something else in mind. I mean, it wasn't bad that St. Francis wanted to go and defend the church. I mean, if you think about the church at that time and the world at that time, especially in Italy, the reason there are so many walled villages on top of hills is because Italy was not unified and there was constant infighting. I mean, when you go up to Siena, you learn about how Siena and Florence were constantly at each other's throats and in competition. And Catherine of Siena had a lot to do with calming things down between these various factions. But he goes back there, and he's basically saying, okay. And he's probably embarrassed, right? Probably feeling defeated. But at least he has the courage to bow his head and say, Lord, what do you want me to do? Some people may see that statue as a sign of defeat, but it's actually a big sign of victory, because that's where the Lord starts. You have to submit yourself to him. You have to show him you are willing. Even if it's not what you want to do at the moment, say, Lord, as our Lord did and our Blessed Mother, your will, not my will, be done. So please, if you're heading to Assisi, don't miss spending time praying and pondering this very powerful image of this great saint, St. Francis of Assisi, the return of St. Francis. You can't miss it. Well, you can, because some people walk by very quickly after they exit the upper level of the basilica. But it's worth some time to think, to reflect, and to ponder. Lord, what do you want me to do? A question we have to ask every single day. I am yours. I was made for you. What do you want me to do? Those are the words of St. Teresa of Avila, another great saint. Check it out, The Return of St. Francis Statue. I feature it in my book, Italy's Shrines and Wonders. Thanks for listening to another segment of Italy's Shrines and Wonders Wednesday. The book is by EWTN. We'll be right back.
What does the 8th commandment demand of us? The Catholic Catechism says this commandment forbids misrepresenting the truth in our relations with others. This derives from the vocation of holy people to bear witness to their God who is truth and who wills the truth. Offenses against the truth, either by word or deed, are fundamental infidelities to God and thus undermine the foundation of our covenant with Him. The Old Testament tells us God is the source of all truth. His word is truth, as is His law. Jesus Christ is the whole of God's truth made manifest. To follow Christ is to live in the spirit of truth, says the Catechism. Jesus taught His disciples the unequivocal nature of truth when He instructed them, "Let your yes be yes and your no be no. Anything more is from the evil one." This is Peggy Stanton, and this has been the Order of Malta's Minute with the Catechism.
It's time for Family Man with Dr. Gregory Popcak.
Make family life the most important activity on your calendar. Parents often worry about losing their kids' hearts to peers, to the culture, or to the media, but simply restricting your kids' access to friends, culture, or media isn't the answer. Spending more time with them is. Kids give their hearts to the people and things they spend the most time with. If we're not making daily family time the most important activity on our schedule, we're effectively giving our kids permission to give their hearts to someone other than us. Putting family time first and scheduling other activities around it is one of the most important practices Catholic families can have. To discover more ways your family can celebrate the liturgy of domestic church life, check out the newest editions of Parenting with Grace and visit CatholicCounselors.com. I'm Dr. Greg Popcak, but you can call me Family Man.
To discover more ways faith can enrich your life, visit CatholicCounselors.com.
Welcome back. Catholic Connection wrapping up a Wednesday, as we always do, with, of course, Joan Lewis, Joan's Rome. Great to catch up with her from the Eternal City. Oh, my goodness, so much news. I was telling folks at the top of the hour, Joni, to make sure that if they're going over for the Jubilee year, to check out the different celebrations and gatherings that the Vatican is doing. We know that they just wrapped up a special meeting for the World Day of Communications with journalists and other communicators, and I'm writing in the Register about the event they're doing for deacons and their families, which is coming up in February. So there's a lot going on, and it's kind of fun if you check it out before you go over, because maybe there's something that people can attend if it's in their area of interest. So much stuff happening, and that's why we talk to you. So what's the latest from Rome this morning, my dear?
Well, of course, the latest is the great big document that came out. This was really extraordinary. The document that came out yesterday morning from the Vatican on AI. And the thing is, I'd like to emphasize, I'd like to go in a minute back to that Jubilee on communications, because actually communications with the Holy See press officer from them has been actually kind of a major issue in the past, if not, months, the past year, and certainly for the Jubilee of the world of communications. And but anyway, like you said, there is the official site, and the official site, just if you can't spell jubileum in Italian, in Latin, just, go to Google and do official Vatican Jubilee site, and you'll go there, and you'll see the calendar of events. And when you click on calendar, you're going to see general calendar, should bring you to the month you're in. And then you're going to see calendar of major events. And there's, I think it's 42 total throughout the year. Now, when they say major event, they're referring to an event that is a weekend long minimum, usually Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And sometimes there's events like there were for communications before and after the Jubilee. So people come to Rome for a big weekend, but it might end up being a week. And then it's on the calendar of major events that you will find something like the Jubilee of deacons, as you said. And the thing is, maybe, you're a member of the Order of the Holy Sepulchre, and you find out, of course, if you are an order, chances are, if your lieutenancy is coming to Rome, they would have, advised you by now. So, but then among the general calendar events are dozens and dozens, I haven't counted them all, of the diocesan groups or groups from universities, etc., that are on the calendar to come to Rome to attend a papal event or whatever. So there's a lot to see on the site, and you can almost be overwhelmed. There's lots of languages, by the way, so you needn't worry about that. Let me see. Italian, Spanish, French, German, Portuguese, Polish, Chinese, and Arabic. So you're doing okay if you speak any one of those languages. And obviously, I failed to see this, to say English. But one of the events, or one of the things that are featured, of course, is going through the 4 holy doors here in Rome of the 4 papal basilicas. And I've had a number of people who are leading groups write me and say, how do we get through the doors? And I can't tell you how much time I spent on this site. And from what I have gleaned, because the site doesn't say it, the only basilica for which you, certainly if you're coming with a group, would need to register the number of people, et cetera, set up a date, is for St. Peter's Basilica.
Yeah.
But you're an individual, you're a couple, you're a family of 5. You can it's very easy in St. Peter's Square. I saw this yesterday when I was filming. And you just follow the signs that say Porta Santa, Holy Door, and whatever your number, unless you're a group, then you simply walk in and follow those arrows. If you're a group, you have to go to the communications office on Via della Conciliazione and pick up your permission, and then you get the group leader gets a cross to carry, etc. So, but for the other 3 Jubilee basilicas, St. Mary Major, St. Paul's, and St. John Lateran, you can just go. I mean, I could get in a taxi or a bus at 4:00 and go over and get into any one of those holy doors. So, but there's nothing on the site of St. Mary Major, for example, for I couldn't find it for registering if you have a group. So there's kind of a lack of information for some things, but. And that lack of information, Teresa, that was so visible this past weekend was the Jubilee of the World of Communications. And I have to say, what I was aware of, having talked to people who had some of the experiences, Elise Ann Allen, she's with Crux, of course, senior correspondent, and she wrote, the first Jubilee event indicates the purpose and challenges for the whole year. And the fact that the first Jubilee major event was for the world of communications. And a lot of people wondered, Teresa, why this was not held in the spring on the actual day of the World Day of Social Communication.
Right.
January 24th is the Feast of St. Francis de Sales, patron of Catholic journalists. And it's on that day, January 24th, that the Pope's message is always released for the World Day of Communications. But the thing there was the least of this past weekend was communications. If you had been, if you
can't make it up, right? Yeah.
If you remember, an accredited journalist of the Vatican, and you're on the WhatsApp site of the Vatican, you would have been aware that nobody knew where to meet, nobody knew where to go, and once you were at the Paul VI Hall, there was no Wi-Fi. The journalists were
get out of here. No Wi-Fi.
No Wi-Fi, and that's I could read you, but of course I'm not allowed to. I could read you what all the different journalists were saying, and it was, are you getting Wi-Fi? Somebody could get through and do somewhat of a blog or a commentary or something on their phone, but people on a laptop or an iPad, a tablet, they just couldn't get through. But it was just unbelievable. There was so little, if any, information on logistics. And I'm talking just about this first group, and it's communications. Didn't the Vatican even think that if anything went wrong during a weekend dedicated to the media and communications, that the word would get out? It
always amazes me. I don't understand it because when I read, I would have loved, I was reading the summary and what they were doing, and I was reading the statement that the Holy Father made to the journalists. And, you and I are journalists, we're communicators, and we love our saints, St. Francis de Sales and others that, St. Maximilian Kolbe and others that are dedicated, St. Clare to the media. It's so beautiful, and I was kind of bummed. You and I have been to Vatican conferences under Benedict and others that have been pretty good. They've been pretty informative. And it's so disappointing. This is communications. Communicate, for goodness sake.
Well, you'd even have, for a big event, since this is called a major Jubilee event, the World of Communications, there wasn't even a press conference, to announce it and give all the information to the media. Okay, you knew a couple of events. You knew there would be Mass at St. John Lateran. You knew there'd be an audience with the Pope Saturday. You knew there would be Mass with the Pope on Sunday, which was also Sunday of the Word of the Lord. But what was so funny, I had lunch with some journalist friends who were in town specifically for the Communications Jubilee and apologized when we met. They said they were late. When we met at La Vittoria for lunch, because they were at the office of the Vatican where, if you're going to be in one of these major events or something for which you have asked, permission or a special document, they were at that office. And the huge numbers of people waiting to get inside for the weekend Communications Jubilee, they actually had to finally leave at a certain point. One of them left. And then the other one, a couple, the other one stayed. But you know what? Inside this office, once they got in, there were only 3 Vatican staff members. And Teresa, I hope you're sitting down. Not one of them spoke English. And if you're going to have an event, you and I, we speak English. It is our native language. We were born in America. But there's many, many people, including the journalists who are here every day covering the Vatican, who have English, but it might be their second language. And so you've got to have someone at the information desk for people coming to get their Vatican IDs or whatever they signed up for. You've got to have someone who speaks one of the major languages of the world. So for a weekend of communicators, it was there were some difficult moments, and one of them wrote that they quoted a journalist, I guess it was Crux, and said they were upset they couldn't get connected, leaving them in a sort of black hole inside the audience hall. And in one case, a journalist, it took 15 minutes to send a picture to an editor over WhatsApp. So, anyway, hopefully these people, contacted the Jubilee office itself, and the Jubilee office hopefully has read some of these reports on the lack of communications during the Communications Jubilee. So, yeah. I mean, we're only a month into it. Oh, and by the way, so the Holy Doors have been opened, the one in St. Peter's. It's Been just a tad over a month, and 1 million people have already gone through.
Wow.
So,
Wow.
yeah,
That's amazing.
They just published that information the last few weeks. I don't know. I failed to ask about this for today. I don't know about the other 3 basilicas. I'm sure there's some kind of count going on, but I have not read any figures. But as we can see, the major, the really important, and that they shouldn't be ranked, but the really important holy door for people seems to be St. Peter's, But if you're in Rome as a pilgrim, you're going to go to all 4 eventually. You're not just going to go to one. So,
what's it been like for you since the Jubilee year began? Because I know, depending on whom you speak to, for example, we had Monsignor Hogan from the Vatican Patrons come to speak to our Michigan chapter of the Patrons last month in December, and he said that he's heard 40 million. I know that the other statements have been 30 to 35, but he said his office is hearing 40 million in Rome alone for the Jubilee year.
Well, I'll tell you what I have heard. I have heard this from taxi drivers, from hotel people, from restaurants, that the number, I've not seen anything with the 4 in it. I mean, maybe 34 million, but I've seen in the 30s, starting from 30 million up. And the people I just mentioned that I talked to, they all have a feeling, they said you'd never know there was a Jubilee in Rome. There's just not that many people. And, the rooms in hotels are available. Restaurants are on fields overflowing. Now, I want to say, this is only January.
Right.
This is not a big month in the Northern Hemisphere anyway.
Right.
For travel, schools are, ongoing and everything else. So Easter, probably even Lent, but certainly Easter and then some other big Jubilee events will see crowds. But the feeling is, of all those people I spoke to, that the numbers have actually scared people away who don't even want to come to Italy necessarily, for a pilgrimage, for a Jubilee, but okay, listen, we're going to come in 2026 when there will be smaller crowds. I suppose if I was going to come to Rome, but not for a Jubilee, I'd look at some of those numbers and say, woo, there's going to be huge lines. I won't get to, go anywhere. So I think that some of the numbers mentioned by the media have indeed discouraged people. But again, I can say, because it happens every year at Easter time, Jubilee or not, there's going to be huge crowds leading up to it, certainly for Holy Week, and then even the week after, which leads up to Divine Mercy Sunday.
Yeah.
So,
but you know what? I would never say don't go to Italy because of the crowds, because there's a way to work around it, and you and I are experts at it, and it's such an amazing experience. Rome will always be Rome, and especially a Jubilee event. If you can get there, don't miss it. Joni, great to speak with you. Look forward to next week. Of course, Joan Lewis. You can find her beautiful article, Joan Rome, at WordPress.com, and we'll talk to her again next Wednesday. We'll be right back.
People ask how they can care for older family members who can't fully care for themselves. One answer is Visiting Angels, America's choice in senior home care. Visiting Angels assists adults nationwide with 600 locations to continue living at home and not have to move into a nursing home. Their caregivers provide assistance in hygiene, meals, and light housework. Services are provided up to 24 hours per day, and you can select your caregiver before service begins. More information, including franchise opportunities, is on the web at visitingangels.com.
Christ is the answer with Father John Riccardo.
John 6, verses 48 to 58. Jesus says, I am the bread of life. Your fathers ate the manna in the wilderness, and they died. This is the bread, meaning me. This is the bread which comes down from heaven, that a man may eat of it and never die. I am the living bread which came down from heaven. If anyone eats of this bread, he will live forever. And the bread which I shall give for the life of the world is my flesh. At which the Jews disputed among themselves, saying, how can this man give us his flesh to eat? They're scandalized by this. How is it that we're not? How is it that we just hear this and go, oh yeah, I know that passage? They're just outraged and at least perplexed. Sane people, inspired teachers, wise men, prophets don't say things like this.
Italy aficionado Teresa Tomio's newest book is coming soon to the Ave Maria online store. In Italy's Shrines and Wonders, Teresa Tomio provides how best to navigate the most popular sites, best routes, and how to best soak in all the beauty Italy has to offer. She also shares the most inspiring journeys to make your Italy excursion utterly unforgettable. Shrines and Wonders from Catholic Connections, Teresa Tomio will be found soon at AveMariaRadio.net.
Appreciate you listening to EWTN. Of course, tomorrow it's a Thursday. Yay, that means Father Mitch Pacwa. Speaking of EWTN, we will discuss cultural connections, what's happening in the world. We'll get his take on it. Thanks for tuning in. Again, have a blessed Wednesday. Talk to you on a Thursday. Ciao.
You've been listening to Catholic Connection with Teresa Tomio. Catholic Connection is a co-production of Ave Maria Radio and EWTN Radio, and carried across the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network. Our producer is Andrew Kruchek. For copies of this program or for more information, visit AveMariaRadio.net. That's AVEMariaRadio.net. Thanks for listening, and join us next time for another edition of Catholic Connection.